Yes, thank you. Is this on? Oh, you can't quite hear it from up here. Yes, thank you so much for the invitation, Dennis. We are so excited and and honored to be here and listening to all of these wonderful presentations and the way that everybody's weaving their way between the pharmacology and the traditional uses of these plants. Over the last couple of years, we have been collaborating on the Huachuma Phytochemical study with Dr. Marcel Masteada and Dr. Michael Long, who are our collaborators at the Albany College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences, as well, of course, as with Wade and Dennis for study design. So we want to share with all of you what we've been doing and report on some of our preliminary results, even though we are not finished yet. So when it comes to Huachuma, there is no visionary plant of its caliber which has so little reliable information available about it in all fields on a global scale. And this particularly seems to bother phytochemists because they like to know things. And they really, all they really know about San Pedro right now is that there is mescaline in there somewhere. So there have been a handful of good studies which have quantified mescaline levels in different Huachuma clones that came from the United States. Other studies have measured mescaline levels of a single species or a variety in Peru. One study even related that phytochemical work to shamanic practice, which was Martin Terry and Keeper Trout's work, which was wonderful. But when it comes to sort of continuing this phytochemical work, there's been this persistent problem of accessibility of samples. People hadn't been able to acquire reliable samples to perform any kind of serious grounded phytochemical study until now. So these numbers that they came up with were sort of lacking context and connection to culture and place. And what we found, is that numbers without context are a lot easier to use destructively. So to give you a bit of background, I started this PhD research 4 years ago, and at the time I'd planned to do a lot of ethnography with the mestizo maestros, who are the traditional carriers of the medicine. But when COVID came along, all of that kind of research was suspended. So I was forced to pivot the whole study really away from human relationships with the plants and back to the ecology of the plants themselves. And though that was disappointing at the time, in retrospect, I think it was the best thing that could have happened. We were already traveling through the Andes, Josip, my husband, and I, and observing San Pedro in many environments, and it was like the filter was changed on our eyes. It was like, with social distancing, the human world sort of faded out of focus and the plants world came into focus. So we surveyed San Pedro populations through about 2,000 kilometers south to north of the Andes, from Arequipa to Huancabamba, both on the coastal side of the Andes and in the high elevation interior. We traveled through many, if not most, of the habitats where San Pedro is endemic in Peru, understanding their conservation status, understanding how local people work with them traditionally or don't work with them. And actually, many of the roads that we traveled in that time have only been constructed in about the last 15 years. So this is the first time that a journey of this scope and a survey of San Pedro of this scope was probably even possible until the last 15 years. We witnessed the plants in every stage of growth, all the way from these grape-sized, tiny little brand new cacti, which miraculously grow from these tiny seeds that are like the size of poppy seeds, all the way up to these ancient old plants the size of a small house, which, they get so heavy that eventually the whole thing just gives out and their roots are like the size of my arms. And when they fall, they break into pieces and then new plants grow up from all of their bodies. They root in again and make an even bigger clump. So we don't know how old some of these plants are, but many of them are very old. We smelled hundreds, if not thousands, of Huachuma flowers, which in itself has been one of the greatest privileges of my life. With pink on their outer petals, filled with honeybees, We ate San Pedro fruits, which taste different in different parts of the Andes. Sometimes it's really dense and floral like a kiwi. Sometimes it's really juicy and sweet like a dragon fruit. Some plants grow in these giant columns, like bigger around than my waist. Some of them are so skinny and dark green and wily that they kind of look like a nest of serpents. And some of them stand upright like, cacti are supposed to, but a lot of them sort of set their roots in the rocks and then grow upside down, hanging from cliffs, even, 50 feet long sometimes. They're like these giant dragons. And so now, at the end of that journey, really the single most, well, hopefully not the end, but at least at a pause point, the single most important thing that has come out of this work has been that we are beginning to understand sorry, I forgot to start my timer. We are beginning to understand the true scope of San Pedro's diversity in the wild. And I'll just mention that this study was entirely within Peru, but there's also native San Pedro in Ecuador, Chile, Argentina, and Bolivia. So this could be replicated in many other places, and we were pretty much entirely confined to Peru, again, due to the pandemic. And so one of the many ways that we are finding to record and share the diversity that we observed is through a wide sampling of the plant's phytochemistry. And we wanted to do this for a couple of reasons. One is that people are so darn interested in how much mescaline and other alkaloids these plants produce, and we wanted to be the ones to do this work so that we would have the opportunity to share it in an integral, connected way that is honoring to the plants. And the second reason is that we are genuinely curious about how this phytochemistry relates to the lived experience of working with these plants. So this study is motivated by several questions that really have never been satisfactorily answered. We know these cacti produce mescaline, and the mescaline quantity varies a lot between different plants. They also contain other sort of assorted phenethylamines, which are compounds related to mescaline, and they also contain some isoquinoline alkaloids, it appears, some of which may be psychoactive or create some kind of entourage effect together with mescaline. So Dr. Long in Albany is working to identify some of these other compounds that may be contributing to the cactus's unique effects. And taking that one step further, how much do the cactus's metabolites actually vary across a diversity of species and varieties? And perhaps most importantly, how can we correlate alkaloid profiles with the lived experience of drinking the plants? And this is a key piece of our approach to phytochemistry. Yes, we want to know how much mescaline is in these plants because we are curious, but we also want to keep all of this phytochemical information in context with the traditional knowledge that permeates every aspect of working with these plants. So to do this, we have created a two-part study that relates phytochemical analysis with traditional knowledge about the diversity of San Pedro. So for every plant that we tested phytochemically, Josip also cooked, prepared a medicinal brew, and drank it to record its unique characteristics as a medicine. So in the first part of the study, which I'll be telling you about, our samples are coming from specific populations of cacti in Peru, and there's a wide range of them. We utilized a different sampling technique than other studies, as Dennis hinted at, which I'm looking forward to telling you about. And our analysis was quantitative, looking at how much mescaline is in the sample, and also qualitative to examine what other alkaloids these cacti might produce. And for the ethnographic portion, we didn't just sample raw cacti, we also sampled the traditionally prepared medicinal brews of Huachuma that Josip cooked. And Josip, as I said, also drinks each and comments on its character and personality and value in traditional medicine. So first I'm going to tell you about the phytochemistry portion, and then I'll turn you over to Josip to tell you about his experience with these plants. So these are the 27 geographically distinct varieties of Huachuma that we sampled for this study, although there are many more that we did not sample. And when I say varieties, I'm not using the word in like an official scientific taxonomic sense. I apologize for that. These are actually phenotypes, but I just didn't want to say the word phenotypes 30 times in the next 30 minutes. It's not very poetic. When I say variety, I just want to express that there's enormous variation in everything from spine length and color. As you can see, there's red spines and yellow spines and orange spines and purple spines and white spines. Flower shape and size and smell, the size and the color and the tissue texture of the cactus columns, all the way to the presence of this lovely yeasty bloom that some plants have on their skin. To the way that they taste, whether they're bitter and sharp or whether they're sweet, to whether the plants grow right side up or upside down. So science recognizes 3 or 4 distinct species of San Pedro in Peru, but even by looking at these photos, and I invite you to really take a look at them, because these are our hosts right now. As you look at them, you can tell that this is kind of a sketchy way to classify these plants. Not only do they vary widely phenotypically within each species, but they also hybridize quite rampantly across species, which makes any effort at classifying them, to quote the notorious San Pedro taxonomist Keeper Trout, hopelessly muddled. But to keep things simple, we identified these cactus species based on their geography. So the study includes 8 varieties of Echinopsis peruviana, 8 varieties of Echinopsis pachanoi, 6 varieties of Echinopsis santaensis, which is a geographically defined species, 2 varieties of Echinopsis cuscoensis, which grows near Cusco, and 3 varieties of Echinopsis peruviana variety puquiensis. So today, we have results from 5 of these plants to share, 4 Echinopsis pachanoi and 1 peruviana. All the other samples are still being analyzed in the lab, but we should have full results by the end of the year. So we actually have a pretty good cross-section of the geographic diversity of San Pedro here. These 5 plants come from about a 1,500 kilometer range, and they include some of the most important populations that humans work with. So we've given them all affectionate code names because all of these, just to protect them, because all of these populations, every one of them is threatened by overexploitation. So we have the dragons, which is Echinopsis peruviana, and then the 7 winds cactus, the ladies, the beloveds, and the giants. These are 4 varieties of Echinopsis pachanoi from both sides of the Andes, coastal and interior. We employed a sampling technique called solid phase microextraction, which has been developed for use in living plants by our collaborator, Dr. Musteada, at the Albany College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences. Field sampling of plants for phytochemistry, like for liquid extraction, has always been a bit of a pain because traditionally you would have to harvest a chunk of the plant's tissue and immediately freeze or maybe dry it, and then keep it frozen while you transport it to the lab. And in rural Peru, there aren't a lot of freezers, and it's not a super realistic undertaking to do that like en masse. But with SPME, you can just vacuum seal the samples in the field and then get them back to the freezer when you get a chance, within a day or 2 max. And then also the compounds that are captured by this sampling kit are isolated from enzymes and from other sample components, which increases the stability of the sample. The sampling kits themselves are inexpensive and tiny, which means they're easy to carry with you. They also do very minimal damage to the plant that you're sampling, much less than other sampling methods. So SPME is less laborious both in the field and the laboratory, and it's a very cost-effective way to run a whole bunch of samples for a preliminary study, which this is. This 2016 paper by Dr. Musteada and Dennis and their colleagues found SPME effective for sampling a variety of different medicinal plants in the Amazon, but the Huachuma Phytochemical study now is the first time it's been used in cacti. So the sampling kit consists of this 5-centimeter long, very thin stainless steel wire. which has been dipped in an absorptive silica coating, which is the solid extraction phase. And basically, you just insert these little wires into the living plant with permission, with an offering, with love, and they do very, very little damage to the living plant. They're left for 30 minutes to reach equilibrium. This is an equilibrium process, so it ends at about 30 minutes. They are placed in their little tubes, they're vac sealed, and they're frozen until analysis. And then in the lab, the probes are desorbed and analyzed with LCMS to get a spectrum that looks something like this. And in case you haven't seen one of these spectra before, it's basically a chemical fingerprint. Where the peak is located from left to right more or less tells us which compound it is, and then the height of the peak allows us to quantify how much of the compound is in that sample. I'm sure mass spectrometers would tell us it's not that simple, but I am not one. So here is mescaline up at molecular weight 212. And these three smaller peaks here are ionized pieces of mescaline. So for each of these 5 plants, we collected three types of samples, 2 in the raw plant and 1 of a cooked brew. So in the raw plant, we sampled both the external green layer and also the internal white tissue. And then we sampled the prepared medicine from that very same plant. And before we get too much into the results, I want to put some caveats on this data. SPME only measures metabolites present in the interstitial fluid and not those that are located inside of cells. So in such a juicy plant as Huachuma, we don't think that there are significant there are significant free concentrations of alkaloids, and these are fairly small molecules with a lot of diffusibility over cell membranes. So we don't anticipate that being a big issue. But because of that, SPME produces metabolic fingerprints, which give sort of a different picture than traditional liquid extraction. We did not control for the age of the plant, size of the plant, time of year, whether the plant was growing in the sun or the shade, whether it was actively growing or recently harvested. We don't know to what extent any of these factors affect alkaloid levels in the plants, but research by others suggests that they do affect them. So we have a graph here of mescaline concentration as a function of the 5 plants, the dragons, the 7 winds, the ladies, the beloveds, and the giants. And you can see that there's an enormous amount of variation between these plants. I mean, between the giants and the 7 winds, there's about 2 orders of magnitude of difference in mescaline levels. And this is within their own species, Echinopsis pachinoi. I highlighted the Echinopsis peruviana specimen in blue, the dragons, which, we don't know. There might be very similar variation among the peruvianas. We will know when we do a little more analysis. But yeah, just an enormous amount of variation. This is the exact same graph you just saw. The green bars show the mescaline levels in the external green layer of the 5 plants. And then we've placed a white bar alongside each of the green bars for each plant, which shows mescaline level in the white inner pith. And so you can see that there's this enormous difference between sort of what's in that external layer as far as mescaline goes, and then the interior white area has quite a bit less mescaline for all plants. Again, the same graph, the green bars are the same, and this time we've placed the cooked medicine samples alongside those green bars. And visually we can see a lot of correlation, between the raw plant and the cooked plant as far as mescaline levels go. But we have to be careful not to read too much into this because the cooked medicine is a lot more reduced than the raw plant. So we sampled, the actual cup of Huachuma that you would drink. That's the sample that we took, and that's reduced down compared to the length of raw plant that was cooked to make it. And As far as the 7 winds go, I would like to have some fancy explanations for you. We don't know why the cooked medicine is so much lower for the 7 winds compared to the raw plant than it is for the other plants. Josip will talk a little bit more about that as well. And so we have some pretty decent, statistically significant answers from these preliminary results, and hopefully we'll have more soon. The green tissue definitely appears to have more mescaline than white tissue, and we are not the first people to discover this. This is something that's been known both in phytochemistry and in Peru among people who cook the plant. The E. pachinoi varies quite a bit between different regions, varies in mescaline levels. We also tested for hordenine in all samples, which is another alkaloid present in the cacti. It's kind of a mild stimulant, and it existed in all the samples, but at levels that were not bioactive. And these results are definitely preliminary. We need to analyze these samples further for more solid conclusions. But this is providing an initial data set for future work with more laborious plant homogenization and liquid extraction. So these numbers are one kind of answer when it comes to understanding and characterizing the diversity of these plants. And if you love numbers and graphs, these kinds of answers are very satisfying. But if they make your eyes glaze over, and that's okay too, I invite you to shift a little bit in your seat, reconnect with your body, reconnect with your heart, take a deep breath to really receive what Josip is going to come share about these plants. Not yet. I just want to say before you come up, Josip, it's never been our intention to place numbers side by side with traditional ways of knowing as if they were commensurate. Shamanic technologies with Huachuma have been in development for 4,000 years, and LCMS is less than 40 years old. So instead, we will follow the Aboriginal Australian scholars Tyson Yunkaporta's approach to looking at modern problems through the lens of traditional knowledge, rather than what people often do, which is looking at traditional knowledge through the lens of modern problems. So instead of sort of picking out breadcrumbs of what the Andean people know about Huachuma in a kind of lame attempt to support our scientific work, we're bringing these numbers to the vibrant, living, diverse, loving world of San Pedro and seeing if they mean anything there. Yunkaporta says that modern rationalist materialism is simple, dangerously simple. It can deal with 1 or 2 or 3 variables at once before the complexity of nature overwhelms it, like a forest overgrowing an old house and rotting it back to soil. That type of complexity makes our thinking minds short circuit, but that's the kind of complexity that we are faced with every time we ask nature a question. When we think with what Yunkaporta calls ancestor mind, which I believe is really analogous to the kind of thinking that San Pedro teaches us, we can tap into our own ability to experience and act as complex agents, as one with the complexity of nature. So I will invite Josip up to the podium now, who is a complex agent if I ever saw one. He's going to share from his perspective as a Peruvian Huachumero about how these phytochemical results relate with what traditional practitioners in Peru know about the plants.
Hi. Thank you, Laurel, for listening to the plant. We in Peru, as practitioners, healers, curanderos, shamans, young people going on weekends to walk and feel a great connection with nature. We use San Pedro, Huachuma, the many names local people calls the plants since long time ago, 400 for years or more. But the analysis, the phytochemical analysis we do show us a correlation between what we found mescaline as a really strong component, active element there, but it's not all about mescaline when we are talking about San Pedro. There is a lot more as the spiritual connection that the plant lead us to be in relation with the nature around where the plant lives since I don't know how long time. No? So the different varieties of the cactus are throughout the years understanding as different values on treating different conditions. Yeah, it's not like drink wine, drink beer. Suddenly everybody will be drunk after, I don't know, some glasses. Some people before, some people after. But with San Pedro, the connection with humans on the use through thousands of years makes the plant has some connection on how to be derived. And even everybody talks about master plants. Yes, the plant is a teacher, but also the plant is totally open to learn from us. This is the reason the tradition is still alive. I don't believe nobody has a problem long time ago with the iPhone or with the stress or with all these modern society problems that we have today. But the plant is still open to support humanity on the development of evolution. And also, sampling plants biochemically tells us a lot about what is on the chemistry aspects. But if I show my photo here and I don't say nothing, maybe you can remember me. But you really don't know me just looking at a photo. So looking mescaline levels, looking another alkaloids inside the plant, we know, but we don't understand, we don't have intimacy with the plant. No? So this is what we are trying to explain on my perspective as Peruvian and coming luckily with the tradition of San Pedro masters, and also because my grandfather, he lives and works with San Pedro. So we see here beautiful 27 varieties of Peruvian echinopsis. And what happened in Peru is like not so much people talks about echinopsis, Peruviana or Pachanoy. People talks about many names of the plant San Pedro in the more contemporary societies, Huachuma in North Peru, Gigantón in some places on the Andes, Cure, Espino. There's like really different names that are related to the characteristic of the plant and the relationship with the nature around the environment and the sacred of these places. But commonly on the traditional use of the plant, we know San Pedro macho. Yeah? San Pedro macho is not so much used because it's super strong, can be super strong, properly cooked. So personally, I use San Pedro macho when I already know a process of somebody that needs a really deep healing process, and maybe we want to be ready to go in fast in only one big great session to resolve some problem that is like urgent. And it's how the maestros take San Pedro macho carefully. Means is San Pedro macho high in mescaline content, but it's not always the answer for all the problems of what we are looking to help. And there is what everybody knows as San Pedro hembra. This is the San Pedro that is spineless. It's a San Pedro that can be used for a wide range of possibilities. No, it's like from simple use to have a cleansing floral bath in the communities, to the most complex ceremonies with the most variety of reasons, no? Yeah, people who comes looking for healing with San Pedro and not just for fun or have a good time. People who also experience sometimes San Pedro and start to understand the connection and the importance that San Pedro can have in life. Are always served in the most of the cases. That's the most popular variety that we use it for a long time. And we know these plants as giganton, and this is a plant that don't has too much use on like ceremonies, because it's lower on mescaline. It's a soft, no? So it's a plant that still with some uses, even like practical uses, to put on the fences of the farms, to make adobe bricks, things like that. To talk about the 5 plants we tested, sampling and we cook, I want to introduce you to the dragons. The dragons are the first plants that I ever tried at young age, as a kid on the garden, a raw cube of like a salad. My brothers and sisters takes to have the good time on the garden in the house in the 70s. These plants are today not enough connected with the tradition to heal and with the like a ceremonial use. But it's great to see that in some highlands on his habitat, the people are still having some pots with dragons on the balcony or on the rooftops. That is weird, because traditionally San Pedro is used on the front door to protect about bad energy in many northern houses. But looks like people are still having a feeling or sensation that the dragons are enough powerful to protect the house from external energy that comes from outer space or from some winds that are flying around. Even these plants are not connected with his community in this cultural way. The plants are really well known about that is strong. So the danger today for these plants is like at least 90% of the plants that are used in the touristic market in Cusco and the surroundings for ceremonies, for retreat centers, for illegal exportation, are coming for these populations that are stable, but the last 10, 15 years, the consumption, the overexploitation of these plants are growing so fast, no? So it's something that we are working with Huachuma Collective to try to look how is the situation of every endemic variety all around Peru. I want to share with you my personal experience working with this plant. Personally, I cooked the dragons about 10 years ago, when I started to share medicine for people and not only for me. And the dragons are maybe one of the most strong medicines that I know. I need to use really carefully how much to serve to everybody, because it's a plant that has a really great spirit. It's like you need to be ready to feel a connection with this plant to ride a dragon and flying over the Andes, looking to take a ride all around where the plant lives, no? But the medicinal value this plant have is like always when I work with this plant, the problem somebody is looking to solve in different levels, physically, emotionally, mind. The plant leaves us to go really straight to the core of what is super easy, the connection to, okay, here we can find some emotional trauma, some patterns, and the connection with some visions and images, memories that are activated by the plant are like really incredible and strong. Also, this plant works so good on how act on the body. No, it's drinking the dragons, when we finish, we feel a lot of release on the energetic charge our body are carrying, and also the effect that the plant carry as residual with us takes days. No, we can feel the connection with the plant after ceremony. Sometimes still working physically for the week. We have here to show the 7 winds. 7 winds are plant that is really connected with the traditional in North Peru, the traditional way to use the mesa, the traditional used to singing and chanting on ceremonies. And I meet this plant ceremonially in the 80s when I was really young with my master Felipe Pereda. And the connection that this plant have with the communities around where they live is still really active. No, it's a plant that is, we have evidence of the use of this plant at least in the last 2,000 years. And this characteristic to the plant that we use it on this long time makes the plant really friendly on the cultural use that we can try to get from 7 winds. Sadly, the overuse, the growing population on the endemic area of 7 winds makes today not easy to found on the wild. There, the good thing is like the cultural connection makes like the people around the towns where this plant live has some plants in the backyard, in the front yard, and there is a good source for medicine. Seven winds are really psychedelic, has a really makes a really good sense of happiness and feeling of love. It's really visionary and is so related to iconography that comes from the Moche territory. And this iconography that some people can believe, wow, I will enjoy a nice trip connecting with ancient images and visions. I don't know why, even the people that don't born in this territory, is how we understand the plants keeps the memory of the time. It's like what the plant learns through years from people is a fingerprint that the plant has inside that can share with us on the way of visions. But today, we can take some of these iconographic visions as ways to drive the energy of the plant towards the way of healing. For example, just drinking 7 winds can be super common to get images of some spiders or crabs. And if we see on Moche iconography, the crab are related to the infraworld. And if I found somebody in connection with crabs through a ceremony, I will ask about the fears, and maybe I will towards conversation to the fear of death or to fear of what to do in life. So this really simple iconography that we can see with some plants like 7 winds can, and I can tell you many more examples, but I have not enough days to talk with you about a specific experience. Makes us appreciate this plant so well in this way. Also, even how a strong fame the plant has is really friendly. I'm start to think, looking the graphic Laurel show you, on what happened when we cook 7 winds, that the mescaline level comes down. And maybe this is the reason why even the strong of the plants, we can drive ceremonies in a way that is super friendly and is super calm. It's, with the 7 winds, never we go like more far than we need. That's what it's beautiful to work with this plant. We have here the ladies. I have the chance to drink the ladies every some years when I visit masters in North Peru. And this is the first time I cook the ladies, because I'm not so related to this area. I'm not living around. But these plants also are really well accepted on the contemporary society in the urban areas. It's a plant that is really well used on a different range of activities, since simple flower baths to more complex ceremonies, to maybe the mayor of a city wants to open a new bridge and he calls a master. Hey, master, please, you can do a ceremony, a pago a la tierra, you can do an offering, and you please bless with San Pedro, because all the community are really familiar with the use of the plant since long time ago. The ladies we observe a nice population on the wild, but the lack of seven winds on the northern markets are start to put pressure on these plants. Even they have the fame to don't be so strong. Is I think the next problem we will have in North Peru, because the expansion of the overuse of the plant are pushing outside the local boundaries what's happening with the plants. I drink the ladies with much love and trust, and yeah, it's really connected with environment. Drinking the ladies, I feel a really good connection with the landscape, mountains, river, the vibration of the sea, and this plant I found is really good to work on groupal sessions, because it's not extremely powerful and let us to manage the energy we put in each one individual on a session without to use too much energy from each one. Also, to finish with this plant, I found and I see by experience drinking before that is a really good to work on relationships, not only individual relationships, but community relationships. The beloveds are the plants that I received as a legacy from my grandfather, my Andean grandfather, and this is the plant that I start to grow 99 in Sacred Valley, and a little bit after in Lima. It's the plant that I better know and better knows me. It's really lovely plant that in his local environment are not so well connected with culture today, but it's the powerful plant that I know, and it's also the plant that carry the legacy of the Inca culture in a really vibrant way. It's a really versatile plant. It's a plant that I prefer to work always with this plant, but brings me the chance to go directly where I go, to the people working, and also it's really well connected with human and with like modern problems with modern technology. It's a plant that, for example, allows to play electronic music and enjoy the exploration of the mind, not only in a medicinal way, but in towards expansion of conscience. For example, it's like more than 100 full moon sessions with electronic music, and these plants make me tell you that if we know a plant that is looking on the future of evolution and new uses for different kind of issues, this is the plant. The giants is the first time also that I cook these plants, but normally we know that has not too much medicinal value, but local people still connecting with the most simple uses, like a scratch, a mosquito bite, or things like that. And it's well conserved on backyards, front yards, and fills the local markets, as many northern communities are doing. When I drink the first time the giants, I drink 4 times what normally I drink. And I go to walk in a really a nice mountain surrounded of San Pedro's. And the feeling was that the body and detoxification of the body becomes present in a way that I don't imagine it. And the connection with another master plants present in the area was just outstanding for me. I was driving to some specific elder plants in this mountain, and after 8 or 10 hours to drink, I start to have a conversation with people, and also I feel like carry a nice connection on an emotional level. After 30 years knowing the plant, 12 years cooking for people, I can see that just looking for the high level of mescaline on a plant is not enough to understand fully the gift the plant can bring us. No? For example, living more than 20 years in Sacred Valley, where it's not an old tradition of the use of San Pedro, it is almost all people that, like me, that we moved there. And what I see is like, yeah, people need to satisfy the demand of the market, so people cook more the green layer of the plant that contains the higher mescaline, and they throw up the white side. No, that is a demonstration that when we are looking on psychedelics for numbers, what happen is what we are throwing out the heart of the plant. And this just through observation, standing in front of the plant for years that we can receive all the teachings the plant have to share with us. So we can finish to tell you that the content of mescaline on the plants generally has to do with how much strong he is, but not on how much power of healing has. It's necessary to how you cook, how much you cook, on who is cooking the medicine. Also, all San Pedro cacti, as we can see on this study, the lower content mescaline, the super powerful ones, has unique gifts that we need to learn how to use. We need to pay attention and take care of the plant to understand how it's possible to towards and drive the energy of these plants to the benefit of more and more people. And we need to try to preserve the knowledge that we already know about how to work with them. Estamos casi a tiempo. Faltan pocos minutos.
Okay. Just over the next few months, we're going to be finishing with the phytochemical portion of the study. We have 22 more plants for which to quantify mescaline and 27 plants to identify other potentially psychoactive compounds. And with this sort of broad sweep of work, we can identify target samples for more complete liquid extraction and analysis. And for us personally, it's really important to keep finding ways to marry the insights of traditional knowledge with scientific study for the benefits of the plants. I specifically want to thank Drs. Mastiata and Long, who unfortunately couldn't be here to present, but they're incredible researchers in Albany doing all the phytochemical work. Thank you to Dennis and Wade for help with the phytochemical study design. SciGen funded the sampling kits and analysis at Albany College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences. The Usona Institute funds all of my PhD work, and they have been absolutely incredible and very supportive. We have living voucher specimens of all of the plants that were in the study and in our 2 Huachuma collective gardens in Peru, and this is a fairly established practice for this kind of work. And most of all, we just have to thank San Pedro for allowing us to do this work in the first place.
Thank you very much. We'll open the floor for questions.
Thank you both so much. I hope this is the future of a lot more research of just a beauty in the way you've married these two ways of knowing. You've touched a little bit on some of the conservation issues, and I'd love to hear more, because I know as we face conservation issues with medicines like peyote, people often will say, oh, just take Huachuma instead. And so I'd just love to hear, and just have you provide some information and guidance to people who also love the cacti about how to approach this in a really respectful way of right relationship. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. There is still a lot of San Pedro in the wild, but very specific populations are being heavily overexploited, and these are the populations that have really high mescaline content. As those start to become extinct or heavily endangered in the wild, and by the way, this is not official in Peru. There's hardly any protection of these plants, so this is all pretty much illegal harvesting that is happening. And so as the higher mescaline varieties are extinguished, they move to other populations. And, what we have to understand is that the actual habitat, like the square mileage that San Pedro grows in, is so much smaller than, either, I would say, I can't compare it to peyote, but, so much smaller than the area that ayahuasca grows in. I mean, it's, we're not talking about a huge area of the Andes here, and it's a very, very specific habitat within the Andes. So, if you want to work with San Pedro, the best, of course, is to grow your own. They're incredible to have around. They're incredible to have close. Josip started his plants in '99, and he has around 6,000 heads in his care now. It's one of the biggest reserves of cultivated San Pedro that we know of in Peru, and actually possibly in a lot of places in the world, although there's some wonderful people in other places. So grow your own.
Thank you. We have another question over here.
Yeah, we heard this morning that synthetic psilocybin may have different properties or behave differently to natural psilocybin extracted from mushrooms. How does pure substance mescaline compare to some of the experiences with the different plants?
I couldn't say, because I have never experienced synthetic mescaline, and I don't really want to. Well, in fact, I really don't want to. San Pedro is very, very clear in the message that synthetics are, it's kind of just like, and I won't repeat that, message, but I don't know. I'm sure some people would be able to answer that question.
Yeah, I just think it's an interest. I'm a simple scientist, so I'd just like to be interested to know whether the pure substance that some people use, you can get anything like the same experience, and whether it is just related to the mescaline or an entourage effect due to other ingredients in the different cacti that make it much more interesting and meaningful than us simple scientists trying to make it synthetically.
Yeah, I would say that the things that make it much more interesting and special are probably not alkaloids, but I appreciate that.
Hi, I'd just like to second your comment about the beautiful balance of information and experience. And I'm interested in the practical therapeutic use of this beautiful plant. I have my own at home, but I've never touched it. I've never done anything with it. So it's a question about how to best prepare a small amount. And also I've been given powder. And I was wondering what the powder is actually extracted from and what you think about the difference between the two.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for carrying San Pedro in your house. The self-use of San Pedro is something amazing when we do responsible and trying to go progressively to deep in the plant. So you want to brew yourself San Pedro, to try a standard recipe. Look the size of your arm, volume, and you can carefully take with you, watch and cut, separating the green to the white, and you can look a pot that maybe 4-5 times bigger than the volume you will boil. Talking about one doses, maybe 5 liters, 6 liters lit, and then you can soak overnight, green and white, and later you can start to boil the plant slowly, not to high pressure, not too much temperature, 70, 75 degrees, depend where you are living on the altitude. And maybe after 4 hours can be good to try to put out the white side, because the white side adds some to the plant. But if you don't know really good the plant, the white side can add too much. That's something that you don't like. Means like a discomfort on your body, or the confusion to release some energy in a way that you are not prepared to do. So you can still, after this, boiling maybe 4 hours more, totally 8 to start. If you test and it's not what you believe, try again and again and again. I hope you have enough plants saved in your house. But it's the way to do by yourself, like experiment, because absolutely the powder. I remember some years ago in Bali, lovely friends, she surprised me. Josip, welcome. We have this powder here to share. Ah, powder, where you get it? In Cusco. Aha, and you want me to try raw? No. Let's see what is. So we can take the powder, wherever you take San Pedro powder from the raw cactus, you can rehydrate in 30-35 degrees centigrados, degrees water, and wait. 1-2 spoons in a glass, and wait some minutes to the plant rehydrate and shows you what is there. It's only white, it's all green, has spikes, has insects inside. And then my advice is never to drink just the powder like with water. You will boil this powder that you get in the same way I explained you how to do with the raw cacti.
And I'll just add that most of the San Pedro powder commercially available in North America and Europe appears to be from the population of the dragons. It's illegally poached a little bit behind our house. And these plants are cut down like firewood, and the indigenous communities are sometimes employed to help because they've lost connection with the plant. They're paid a horrifyingly small amount of money for these plants. They're dried and basically just ground up like firewood. It's a problem.
Thank you. And our last question.
Yeah, thank you so much for a great presentation. I'm very curious about the heat stability of mescaline in San Pedro, because you mentioned different temperatures. And one of the surprising results recently on psilocybin mushrooms was that room temperature air-dried psilocybin mushrooms were far more potent than freeze-dried. And heating the mushrooms drastically reduced the psilocybin content. So in parallel logic, I'm interested in knowing that the duration of cooking at what temperature, what have you found to be the most stable temperature for preserving mescaline content in San Pedro?
Let's see. So I don't know if I can't answer that question maybe as technically as you would like. But the traditional preparations are usually boiled from anywhere from 4 to 12 hours. And traditional practitioners probably vary in whether that's a really high temperature. Josip cooks. Josip's a chef. Josip's very into this, and he cooks. Over the course of about 12 to 14 hours usually. And I won't give away any of his secrets here, but at a just barely simmering temperature seems to be the way to preserve it most, and then also with some additions that help with the stability of mescaline that are traditional and non-traditional.
Also, I want to answer you on my perspective as a cook. And after we cook San Pedro on any way, the YouTube method, the Josip method, you get your San Pedro, that is nice. You want to save something for the next session, you can storage San Pedro on the freeze. It's below 7 to 20 degrees. I will come back next year to Peru. I will open a bottle and I will enjoy with almost identically properties. Also, I have 40 young guys that want to take me to the higher Apu in Cusco, in Ausangate. 40 people, I need to carry 20 liters of San Pedro. No, I will lyophilizing, like a dried, cold dried, the plant to reduce to maybe 5% to get 25, 30 grams per liter of San Pedro. No powder, not the raw powder. The cooked medicine reduced carefully with time, no rush, no machines, sunlight and shadow. And then the same. The first time I do this technique by myself was more than 7 years ago, and I still having a small bottle with this powder that sometimes I pick, like pichar coca with cal, and activate all the sensation of San Pedro, really stable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.